Hello students, with the continuations of the chapter 3, Early Cities, today we will learn emergence of towns in southern Mesopotamia, role of temples and kings, the life in the city, development of writing, literacy, and the legacy of writing. Settlements had begun to develop in southern Mesopotamia from 5000 BC. The earliest city developed from these settlements. Some of the cities developed around temples, some developed as centers of trade, and some developed as imperial cities. The earliest known temple was a small shrine made of unpacked bricks. In due course of time, temples became larger. They had several rooms around open courtyards. Temples always had their outer walls going in and out at regular intervals. This feature was absent in ordinary houses. In temple, people brought grains, curd, and fish to the god. The god was considered the theoretical owner of the agricultural fields, the fisheries, and the hearts of the local community. In due course of time, the processing of produce was also done in the temple. For example, like oil pressing, grain grinding, spinning, etc. Temple became the organizer of production at a level above the household, employer of merchants and keeper of written records of distributions and allotments of various items. Thus, temple gradually developed the scope of its activities and became the main urban institution. But there was also another factor on the scene. Agriculture was subject to natural hazards. Floods and droughts often forced people to shift from one place to another. People often resorted to wars to settle disputes related to land and water. For example, like those who lived on the upstreams, stretches of a channel could divert so much water into their fields that villages from downstream were left without water, or they could be neglected or to clean out the slit from their stretch of the channel, blocking the flow of the water further down. So the early Mesopotamian countryside saw repeated conflict over land and water. When there was a continuous warfare in a region, those chiefs who had been successful in war could oblige their followers by distributing the loot and could take prisoners from the defeated groups to employ as their guards or servants. Such war leaders, however, would be here today and gone tomorrow until a time came when such leadership came to increase the well being of the community with the creation of new institutions and practices. In time, victorious chiefs began to offer precious booty to the gods and thus purify the community's temples. There was a mutually reinforcing circle of development. Settlement of villagers close to the leaders ensure a quick build of army in times of need. On the other hand, people would be safe living in close proximity to one another. Now, life in the city. A ruling elite had emerged. A small section of society had the major share of wealth. This is the evidence by enormous riches buried with some kings and queens at Ur. The nuclear family was the norm. The father was the head of the family. There is little information about the process of marriage. The declaration was made about the willingness to marry. bride's parents gave their consent to the marriage. This was followed by groom's people giving gifts to the bride's people. During wedding, gifts were exchanged by both sides. When her mother-in-law came to fetch her, the bride was given her share of the inheritance by her father. Father's house, herds, fields, etc. were inherited by the sons. Development of writing. Writing is the process of using samples, letters of the alphabet, punctuation, and spaces to communicate thoughts and ideas in a readable form. Writing means expressing our spoken language by using samples, pictures, signs, and words. Writing or script is the representation of spoken sounds in visible signs. The oldest known Mesopotamian tablets were the Kist tablet, which was found in Iraq and written around 3200 BCE in Sumerian language. The tablets contained pictures like signs and numbers. There were about 5,000 lists of oxen, fish, bread loaves, etc. that were brought into or distributed from the temples of Uruk. Ordinary writing material was a soft clay tablets. Mesopotamians wrote on tablets of clay. They invented the earliest known form of writing called cuneiform, using a reed pen to make wedge sharp marks on wet clay tablets. Cuneiform is derived from the Latin words cunus for wet and forma for sharp. Once the surface dried up, signs could not be based on it further. So what they do is, after transactions, tablets were thrown away and each transactions require a separate clay tablet. That's why we know much more about Mesopotamia than contemporarily in India. Mesopotamian script is known as cuneiform script. By 2600 BCE, the letters became cuneiform and the language was Sumerian language. Sumerian language was replaced after 2400 BCE by the Akkadian language. Cuneiform writing in the Akkadian language continued in use until the 1st century BC, more than 2000 years. Why there was importance for writing? For keeping records of transactions, making dictionaries, giving legal validity to land transactions, narrating the deeds of kings, announcing the changes a king had made in the customary laws of the land, storing information, sending messages, seen as a sign of superiority of Mesopotamian urban culture. Literacy. Initially, it was a pictographic script. The sound that a cuneiform sign represented was not a single consonant or vowel, but syllables like put, la, in, etc. Thus, scribers had to learn thousands of samples. Writing was skilled craft as it was to be written on a wet tablet before it dries up. Literacy was limited to a small section of society. Not only were there hundreds of signs to learn, many of these were complex. If a king could read, he made sure that it should be recorded in inscriptions. Sumerian scripts went through years of difficult schooling to acquire their skills. The legacy of writing. Greatest legacy of Mesopotamia to the world is its scholarly tradition of time reckoning and mathematics. The division of the year into 12 months according to the revolution of moon around the earth, month into 4 weeks, the day into 24 hours, and the hours into 60 minutes, has come to us by Mesopotamians. Then it was transmitted to Roman world, followed by world of Islam, then to medieval Europe. Dating around 1800 BCE are tablets with multiplication and division tables, square and square root tables, and tables of compound interest. Solar and lunar eclipses were observed, and their occurrence was noted according to year, month, and day. So there were records about the observed positions of stars and constellations in the night sky. None of these above achievements would have been possible without writing and the urban institution of schools. For example, like the Assyrian king Assurbanipal established a library at his capital Nineveh. He made much effort to collect tablets on history, epics, Onam literature, astrology, hymns, and poems. Copies were made of important texts such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the copier stated his name and writing the date.